If you love horror films as I do, slasher films are a staple of our genre. I'm going to get into my top 10 slasher films of the 80s. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to give you my list of my top 10 favorite slasher films from the 80s. Yes, just the 80s. And we had some really good ones in the 80s. We had some really decent ones, and we had a lot of crappy ones. But I'm going to give you my top 10. But first, I'm going to get into two honorable mentions for my favorite slasher films of the 80s. My first honorable mention goes to 1980's He Knows You're Alone, directed by Armand Mastrani. This film, I like this film. It's a decent little slasher film, and it has the distinction of having Tom Hanks in it. Only for about 5 minutes, but he is in the film. This is one of his early roles after Bosom Buddies, before he really started doing those 80s comedies. But yes, Tom Hanks is in there. Don't blink, you might miss him. But he is in there and he has a few lines. The other honorable mention I would give for my favorite slasher films of the 80s is Sleepaway Camp. This film came out in 1983 and it was directed by Robert Hiltzig. And obviously it's well known for the shocking ending. And I remember seeing it for the first time, and yes, that ending does take you off guard by... Yes, it does. It takes you off guard for sure. If you've never seen it, check it out. Although Sleepaway Camp is definitely... I like that film, but there's definitely some major problems with it. But still, it's a fun movie. You can have a fun time with it for sure. All right, my top 10. Let's get into it. My number 10 is Maniac. This film came out in 1980 and was directed by William Lutzig. And Tom Savini did the special makeup effects as Tom Savini did a lot of the effects for a lot of films on my list. And I'll let you know which ones as we go down the list. You'll probably already know if you're a huge fan. But yes, number 10, I go with Maniac. Number 9, I would go with Alone in the Dark from 1982. Not that piece of shit movie starring Christian Slater, directed by Uwe Boll. No, not that hunk of shit. This movie, Alone in the Dark, was directed by Jack Shoulder, who went on to do Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, and then a cool little sci-fi horror film called The Hidden later on in the 80s. If you've never seen that film, I highly recommend that one. In this film, you got Jack Palance, Donald Pleasance, and a couple other actors you would recognize in this film. And it's actually a really well done little slasher film. One of New Line's first productions when they started making their own films. My next one on the list, number 8, My Bloody Valentine, the 1981 version. I like this movie. I like the remake as well, but it's a cool little slasher film, Canadian production. If you've never seen it, check it out. It's definitely a fun slasher film to check out. Number 7, I had a hard time with this one. I really like this film. You could consider this not a slasher film. I'm not going to get into why. If you've never seen it, I recommend checking all these out on my list. But April Fool's Day. This movie came out in 1986, and it was directed by Fred Walton, who directed When a Stranger Calls in 79. And it's a fun movie. It really is, and it turns the conventions of the genre on its head a little bit. I recommend it. It's a fun movie, and Biff from Back to the Future is in it as well. So there you go. And Amy Steele from Friday the 13th Part 2 is in it as well. Number 6, The Prowler. This film came out in 1981, directed in Cape May. It was made in Cape May, New Jersey, and it's directed by Joseph Zito. He will come up again later on my list. And also, Tom Savini did the special makeup effects for The Prowler. And it's a cool slasher film. If you've never seen it, check it out. Speaking of Tom Savini, he did the makeup effects on this next film. Number 5, The Burning. This came out in 1981. It was directed by Tony Malum. It's a fun, cool slasher film with a cool villain in Cropsey. And there's some great set pieces in terms of the slasher genre. The canoe scene is always the famous one when it comes to The Burning. If you've never seen The Burning, check it out. It's definitely worth your while to check that movie out. Number 4, I'm going to go with a movie that I think is a fantastic sequel to a classic film, and that is Psycho 2. This film came out in 1983 and was directed by Richard Franklin. And I love the first Psycho, directed by Hitchcock. Obviously, it's known as, it's a classic for sure. But I love Psycho 2, and I think it's a damn good sequel. This movie was, it just gave me everything I want from a sequel to a hit movie. It kind of changed things around, gave you some things you weren't expecting, and I really like Psycho 2. I like Psycho 3 too. Psycho 3 is not as good as 2, but I like 3 as well. But Psycho 2 is number 4 on my list. Number 3, this is one where I'm going to pick one of the later sequels instead of the original, because this is my favorite of the franchise, and it's a damn good slasher film, and that is Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter. This movie came out in 1984, and it was directed by Joseph Zito, the second one on this list directed by Joseph Zito, and it has the distinction of having Tom Savini do the makeup effects for the film. I really like this one. It's my favorite Friday the 13th movie. I love Ted White as Jason. I love Corey Haim in there, Corey Feldman. Sorry, I got Corey's mixed up there for a second. Corey Feldman's in there. He's good. I think the actors, pull the teenage characters off pretty well, and Joseph Zito does a really nice job with the directing. So yes, Friday the 13th Part 4 is number 3 on my list. Number 2, I try not to use more than one film from a franchise, especially ones like Friday the 13th where they made so many the first 8 were in the 80s. Halloween had 3 movies in the 80s, 3 slasher films in the 80s. Part 3 wasn't a slasher film, right? That would be on this list. So there's 2 films from this particular franchise for number 2 that are really good, but I'm going to say Halloween 2, released in 1981, directed by Rick Rosenthal, is my number 2. But as an addendum to that, I also really like Halloween 4, but I'm only going to list Halloween 2 as my number 2 film on my top 10. Number 1, I'm going to give to Nightmare on Elm Street. This film came out in 1984, and it was written and directed by Wes Craven. But if I went with another sequel to this film in the 80s, I would go Part 3 would deserve to be on this list, but I'm only picking one, so I'm going to go with the original, Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 1, written and directed by Wes Craven. So that is my top 10 favorite slashers of the 80s. Quick recap. Maniac, number 10. Number 9, Alone in the Dark. Number 8, My Bloody Valentine. Number 7, April Fool's Day. Number 6, The Prowler. Number 5, The Burning. Number 4, Psycho 2. 3, Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter. Number 2, Halloween 2. And number 1, Nightmare on Elm Street. What are some of your favorite slasher films of the 80s? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. We're all not going to agree on this list, and that's cool. That's the great thing about being movie fans. We all don't have to agree, but I'd be interested to hear what some of your favorite slasher films in the 80s are. Just leave a comment down below. Hit the thumbs up. I greatly appreciate it. Subscribe here. Join me. I'd greatly appreciate that as well, and I hope you're all doing well out there. Stay safe, and I'll be back soon in another video. Thanks. Bye.